Hey everybody, Mr. Regan here, and up to this point we have been looking at these very unique species here and their three shared body structures of their different limbs in an effort to begin looking at how these shared structures can be so different even though all these species come from the same common ancestor. Now, whenever paleontologists make observations of shared structures, there's a few steps that they follow and a few things that they do to make sure that, number one, they have strong observations. Number two, they avoid any errors and making any mistakes, similar to that article that we read. And last but not least, so that they have the best evidence to support any claims that they have. So let's take a look at what they are. So, whenever paleontologists are looking at different body structures that are grouped together or body structures that are very similar and have those shared structures, the first thing they're going to look at is observing the size of the bone within the body structure, things like the thickness and the length, along with the position of the body structure, and they will make several attempts to not only observe, but to describe some of those similarities and differences as they look to count the number of different bones, and using all of this evidence to support claims about differences, similarities, shared structures, and common ancestors. So when we look at these three structures here, the first thing that they said they'd look at is thickness and size. So looking at this, we would notice things like the thinness of the bat wings here and all of the structures that connect to it. They would notice that, for example, the overall size, the width of the wing is very large compared to the others. If you look at the blue section here, it's very thin, okay? If we're looking at the length, this one has a very long set of bones for all of them except for the green one. For this one, it looks like the red and green is long and thick, and the blue is tilted a little bit, and so on. When we look at position, we would notice that this section here is pretty straight for the most part, with a slight bend at the very bottom, and that would be very similar to the one over here, with this one having not only that slight curve, but also the bend. Whereas the bat here, if we're looking at positioning, it looks like all of the different structures are spread out and they're curved down, with that bend being here at the green and red bone. And last but not least, they would make these observations multiple times, comparing some of the similar structures. So like looking at the green section here as being long, in comparison to the red versus here where the red is very long and the green is small, coming back to multiple structures so that they can make the best observations. All of these different observations, hopefully we got into our Amplify link, so that we can now move on to the next section, which is going to focus on the following. We're going to be looking to find evidence using the sorting cards and those slides that we did in a previous lesson. And we're going to be recording some of the evidence in the Amplify page that's going to help us figure out why these shared structures look so different. So even though they have these shared structures in terms of the number of bones and in terms of their placement within the species, we're going to be looking at figuring out how they became so different. So we need evidence to support why these are so different. So in the next activity, we're going to be looking to find that evidence and record the best evidence in the Amplify page. So let's take a look. On slide number 8, task 6, we have our sorting cards, and we have a section where we're going to be collecting our evidence and Amplify for these three species. When we go to the sorting cards, you'll notice that the very first three are the dire wolf, fruit bat, and our camel-looking organism here, or our prehistoric camel. And in the background information, there's evidence about the environment it lived in, how the organism lived, that is going to help us figure out why these structures, these shared structures, look the way they are, why they're different from one another. So we're looking for evidence to help explain that, or evidence that we could use to support why this structure is slightly different from this structure, which is slightly different from this structure. And when we find that evidence as to why this bone is slightly different from these bones and these bones, this is where we're going to go into the amplify page and record it. So the gathering evidence from the species cards, we'd start with a dire wolf, and we're finding information about their environment and how they survived. This information is going to help us figure out why the bones for each species are shaped the way they are. So if we're looking for something to focus on, we're trying to explain why the bones for each species are shaped the way they are. So we'd start with a dire wolf, we'd find that evidence, type it up. We then go to the fruit bat, find that information about why their bones are shaped the way they are, and then move on to our prehistoric camel. When you have all the evidence from the cards that you believe is correct and useful in supporting why that is the shape that it is, you click the hand in button and we go from there. If you have questions, reach out. Otherwise, good luck.